You boys be quiet down there!
Welcome back to PC-98 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-98, the most popular Japanese PC series of the early 1990s. The fourth Farland Story game is called Hakugin no Tsubasa, which means Silver Wings. Starring a whole new cast of characters, can it continue the trend of each game being better than the last? Let's find out. Inside, things are very similar to what we saw in previous games. There's a poster with the same illustration as the cover. The manual is again in black and white. And once again, we have an arranged soundtrack CD, which can be used as the game's BGM. And just like the last game, there are 5 floppy disks. The installer is identical to the previous ones, and the batch file to start the game is called fsw.bat. The W almost certainly stands for Wings. Like the third game, the opening begins automatically when you start the main program. The game's soundtrack gave me a poor first impression by pretty blatantly ripping off the melody from the Top Gun anthem. But luckily, it's just the intro, and the rest of the opening BGM sounds pretty original. Unlike the text-heavy opening of the third game, this one goes back to animation only, which is more impressive and does a pretty good job of showing us the new characters and setting without a single line of text. Insert random Top Gun clip here. This one requires you to enter the serial number from the back cover every time you start a new game. Probably one of the better forms of copy protection TGL used, actually. The game begins, and we're introduced to our new cast of characters. Farland 4 stars a group of rebels who escape the prison of an evil empire and steal a ship from a samurai. Our main protagonist is a human named Phil. He's pretty bland, but I guess anything seems fresh and new compared to Ark in the previous 3 games. His character class is labeled as Fugitive, and his appearance is accentuated by tattered clothes and his often mentioned trademark bandana. He may be the protagonist, but the leader and captain of the stolen ship is Darland, a talking mole. To me, he looks like a wolf, but the manual says he's a mole man.
This is Mole Man in the morning. Good Mole Man to you.
I love how he pile drives the enemies. That's definitely a new attack method for the series. Then we have Grass, a fairy who serves as the healer, and is always busy complaining about something. And last but not least of the initial 4 characters is Well, a duck wearing a necktie and sunglasses. His sunglasses are as important to him as his life. He and the fairy are constantly fighting with each other. I really wish that Phil was the duck's name. Don't you think Phil would be a great name for a talking duck? But just to make sure you remember his correct name, here's a movie clip to help you out.
Me, Phil. You,
Well.
we be friends.
I love the crazy cast of characters here. It feels so fresh compared to the first 3 games, which did have their funny moments, but were far more serious in comparison. The dialogue in this one is less story-focused, opting instead for more banter between the characters. Who doesn't want to know whether the sunglasses or the bandana are going to get thrown overboard? Another cool thing is how big the character portraits are now. They're literally overflowing out of the text boxes. But there's one last important character I'd better introduce before moving on. Early on in the journey, the party comes across a girl floating in the water named Rita. The mysterious circumstances under which she's found of course indicate that she'll be important to the plot. But unfortunately, she's another kind of boring character who's just kind of always smiling and falls in love with Phil for some reason. These two have pretty much zero chemistry, other than both being kind of bland and generic. They're perfect for each other, Mr. and Mrs. Bland. The biggest change to the game's system is that now the playfield is just a plain square grid, whereas in the previous games each line was staggered halfway. Surprisingly, it doesn't really change the feel of the game that much. Hell, I didn't even notice the difference at first. It's not long before the samurai guy comes looking to take back his ship. Ooh, are there pirates? I guess since he's a samurai, a close relative of the ninja, he can't possibly work with pirates. He fails to take back the ship and decides to sink it instead. Well, that was a short high seas adventure. Guess we're stuck on land for the rest of the game. We meet a spear-throwing kid named Raccoon who joins the party. His character class is Child. I didn't realize that was a character class. Another character worth mentioning is a dancer named Kite. I guess I won't consider this a spoiler since it's revealed pretty early in the game, but she's actually a succubus created in a lab by the evil Empire. Interestingly, the succubi were enemy characters in the previous games. Here, the succubus character has the ability to grant an extra turn to the other characters, like the sirens in the previous games. For a while, I kind of wondered if this game even takes place in the same universe as the other Farland games. After all, the series never had fairies, or witches, or handguns, or a bunch of talking critters before. But then Ark is eventually mentioned as a king from long ago, so I guess it takes place far in the future after the previous games. Eventually, the party gets pretty filled out with new characters, though I won't mention them all. The roster is actually about as big as the previous games. I wonder if I have enough whiskey here to revive them all. The duck has pretty poor defense and is constantly dying. I love how when you revive him, he looks like he's saying, "Please just let me die." This game has so many characters, it seems the designers wanted to limit the number of them you can have at a time. For much of the game, there are 2 parties, and the game switches back and forth between them every few stages. One party is led by Phil and the other by Rita, and throughout the game you lose if either Phil or Rita dies, whereas in previous games it was only Ark's death that would end the game. So I guess that you could say that this game has dual protagonists. The party split comes about partway through the game, when Rita is kidnapped by the Empire for like the 2nd or 3rd time, along with some of the others. We won't find out what they want with Rita until later in the game. Hey, that sounds familiar. Kidnapping one of the female characters and then explaining later why she's so special was a plot device used in literally 3 out of the 4 games so far. Far from being the damsel in distress, Rita organizes the characters in prison into the second party. Even the samurai from earlier is now an ally. This game might actually be a little harder than the previous ones. I got a lot of game overs. Accidentally place Phil or Rita in the wrong place and they might get suddenly ambushed and have their entire HP meter drained before you can do anything about it. There were even a couple of times that the autosave from the previous turn wasn't enough to get myself out of trouble, and I had to start the stage again from the beginning. Good thing I always keep a save file at the beginning of each stage. The game has 40 stages, just like the previous one, but I'm honestly not too fond of how large some of them are. Harkening back to the tedious grind of the first game's huge final stages, it does help a little bit that now you can automatically gather all the characters around any character you want, not just the protagonists. Eventually, the 2 parties meet up, and you get to come at this boss and horde of enemies from 2 sides. But at the end of the stage, half the characters get dropped into some subterranean ruins, and the parties get reshuffled. Phil is injured, and for one interesting stage, the remaining characters above ground have to protect him as 2 of them carry him across the stage in a stretcher. And for another interesting stage variation, the characters gain the ability to breathe underwater, so they can travel via these pools into the subterranean ruins. When the 2 parties finally meet up again near the end, you get to choose which 5 characters you want to bring along with Phil and Rita for the final 5 stages of the game. Skip to the time shown on screen to avoid spoilers. The evil Empire is trying to obtain an airborne superweapon called the Silver Wings that was built by an ancient civilization. Rita is a descendant of that ancient civilization, and of course that means they need her in order to recover and reactivate the Silver Wings from the ancient ruins. She was kidnapped by the Empire before the events of the game, but managed to escape. That's about when the party found her floating in the water at the beginning of the game. The final stage takes place aboard the Silver Wings, where the party needs to defeat the God of Destruction who has fused with and taken control of it. Even after defeating the god, Rita knows that the only way to seal him and the Silver Wings away is by sacrificing her own life. She attempts to do so, but Phil has Ark's legendary sword equipped, which is now called the God Slayer, and it protects Rita from death as she performs the ritual. Hermes, the king of the gods from the previous game, conveniently explains what happened against a white background. The game actually has a bad ending, which occurs if you beat the game without equipping the God Slayer, causing both Rita and Phil to perish. Since you only get the God Slayer in the very last stage and it starts out unequipped, it's surprisingly easy to forget to equip it. Luckily, you'll have an autosave at this point from right before you killed the end boss, so it's pretty easy to see both endings. Anyway, the good ending shows what the characters are up to a few years after the events of the game. The duck and the fairy have become a permanent duo, traveling together, but they're still at each other's throats. Here the fairy is offering an innkeeper a tasty duck in exchange for a night's lodging, and Phil and Rita are married with kids. Like the previous game, the music in this one is kind of a mixed bag. Crap. I promise the music in the next game is actually good. I played the 5th one 20 years ago, and even booted it up again to capture footage for the first Farland video, and it really holds up. I guess playing the 5th game first gave me the false impression that the whole series has excellent music, but apparently that's not really the case. Surprisingly, the same 3 newcomers credited for the music in 4 are also credited in 5, but in 5 they're joined by a somewhat famous composer named Tomo Kasahara, who just might be the magic ingredient, I guess. Anyway, a few of the lighter tunes in 4 actually sound pretty good. And some of the overly used stage BGMs are quite catchy, though whoever arranged the FM sound didn't seem too interested in making sure higher notes don't become irritating. The game fares a bit better in the MIDI arrangements overall, and the CD arrangements are inoffensive, though pretty bland. For me, the FM sound is always the main attraction, so it's disappointing it wasn't handled a little better. Just as in the previous videos, let's take one track and compare each of the different arrangements. The 2 secret codes are still here, and are performed exactly the same way as in the 3rd game. Once again, the only port of the game was the Asian MS-DOS version. Farland 4 has a wacky cast of all new characters. Even all the enemies are brand new. Besides the game engine, nothing is reused from previous entries in the series, which could not be said of either of the previous sequels. The dialogue is also really fun to read, and the story is much easier to follow than the 3rd game's overly complicated plot. So in the previous video, I called the 3rd game the best one yet, but now with the 4th game...
Looks like we have a new champion.
I've got me a duck and a wolfman here now, and a fairy, and I guess that these are humans. Let's go get a truck and a keg of beer now, and drive it onto our stolen ship. I've got me a duck and a wolfman here now, and a fairy, and I guess that these are humans. We're gonna get a truck and a keg of beer now, and drive it onto our big old stolen ship. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-98 Paradise. We've got a lot of new patrons on the list this time, and I hope you'll join me in thanking them for keeping me motivated to make new videos. Thanks also to everyone for liking and subscribing, and for continuing to watch all these Farland Story videos. Next I'll be back with something else, and I hope you'll join me.